Well, the time has come. It is above 50 degrees today, which means my bees should be flying, and they're not. If you're new here, I am a first-year beekeeper, and we keep our bees up on the roof, which I'm about to show you. Overwintering in Zone 5 here in Iowa is very hard, especially with the increase with mites and moths and beetles and all sorts of things. So I'm so nervous. You never know how grumpy these bees are gonna be. The one hive, again, if you're not new here, you know that the one hive is quite aggressive and the other hive is very docile and not so low-key, but low-key. I am expecting the small hive to die because we caught these bees really late in the season. We actually got them from one of my husband's friends who has like 8+ hives. And it was August, and they were like, we don't want swarms because here in Iowa, if you catch a swarm in August, it's like dangerous because they won't have enough reserves for winter. But they were free. And we're all about doing things free here. I've got my sugar because I've been feeding them the mountain camp method, which means you set this paper on top of the frames and then pour the sugar on top of it, and they come and eat it as they need to. I've got my measuring cup to scoop out the sugar, my gloves, my veil, and my handy dandy hunter boots. I suppose I should say, hi, welcome back to the heart of home, where I'm very imperfect and I do things that go against the grain of homesteading. We're doing this all suburbanly and figuring out how to make it work. So I actually checked my bees in December and they were both still alive after a super cold snap that we had. And it got, oh mercy, this is not my preferred veil. But anyways, in December, it got below 0 degrees and it was super cold. And everybody told me, you know, the cold doesn't kill bees, it's the moisture and the water and the mites and yada, yada, yada. And so I was all nervous because I knew that my bees didn't have a ton of food because they only had like maybe a couple frames of honey. And we didn't harvest any honey. Like they literally only had what they could make in the span of like 2 months, which is why an aggressive hive is a good hive, because they get things done, man. But again, it's above 50 degrees today. They're not flying, and they were flying in December when it was this warm. They were doing a cleansing flight, which is, well, they leave and they poop and they pee somewhere outside of their home. And so I really thought they'd be doing it today, and they're not. Here goes nothing, guys. Quite a bit of mold. I'm just going to take this off because it's not working. Quite a bit of mold collected up here, which tells me there's moisture in the hive. I see, I don't know if you guys can see it. Yeah, there's water just sitting right there, which is also not a great sign. Uh-oh. No bueno. Darn it. Dang, man. That's unfortunate. I had really high hopes for this hive. Now you're probably wondering, why did she insulate with that insulation? And that's because it's all we had. I had people that were saying something like they wouldn't have used fiberglass because it could get in the honeycomb. And then I've had other people say, nope, like I've used fiberglass for years and it's been fine. Like if you're a beekeeper, you know, you ask one question and you get 10 different answers. Wow, this is a bummer, man. This is all the sugar that was left. So now I have to ask myself, what did they die from? And And what I can see is there's quite a bit of moisture in here. The bees had actually crawled up into the insulation, which makes me wonder if I looked through here, I wonder if my queen would be in the middle of this, because they were eating into the insulation. So cold temperatures and moisture apparently don't kill bees. What does kill bees is a cold, wet bee. Don't think they starved, because they're clearly, if a bee is starved, a lot of times their tongue will be out of their body, and it's not. Man, I'm so bummed right now. The other thing I've learned when it comes to feeding your bees over the winter, especially here where it's really cold, obviously the colder the weather, the more the bees vibrate and try to keep themselves warm, which means they're burning more calories, which means they need to eat more, which they had sugar, they had honey. I'm gonna check the frames to see if they even consumed that honey, but a lot of times people will post pictures and they're like, my bees had honey or my bees had sugar and they still died, and it looks like they, you know, starved, like all of their butts were hanging out of the honeycomb and their tongues are sticking out. And what people have said is that the cluster may not always move, because they move like in one big unit to stay warm around the queen. They may not even be able to move to the area where the food is at. So like, despite all of your best efforts, sometimes colonies just die and there's nothing you can do about it. Part of me is like really hoping that when I start messing with this hive, a small cluster of them will come out. Nope. Oh man, I actually see my queen. I see the blue dot on her. Let's see if I can get her out. Man. That was my queen. She was a feisty one too, man. They're dead.
All of them?
Yeah. I found my queen, she's dead. I am seeing here that there are bees with their tongues out. All right, I don't know how well you can see that. See if my camera will focus, but you can see right at the mouth of the bee, there's like a long, kind of reddish brown thing, and that's the tongue. I'm sure there's a more technical term for it, but that is typically what you would see. That's one of the multiple signs that you would see if they died of starvation. I don't even know what I'd do with this. Like, do I just throw them on the ground and let them decompose into the soil? I will try to save my frames. I lost my hive tool when we went and picked up these girls, and I deeply regret it. There's actually no honey in here. Isn't that funny? They're like empty. What the heck? See, this is also indicative, which usually it's more than just a couple, but there's bees. Their butts are just sticking out of the honeycomb. And that's a good sign of starvation, but it's also, I've heard, a way that the center of the clump of bees stays warm, which they wouldn't have been clustered down here. I am amazed. There's literally nothing on these frames. Which makes me wonder, maybe they actually did die of starvation, which I did my absolute best. I gave them plenty of sugar. I let them keep all of their honey. And I checked it every day that was above 50 degrees this winter, which is now the second time. I am seeing, put this back, on frame 1 here, frame 1 or 10, whatever you want to call it, one of the outside ones, there's mold, which tells me that the moisture was dripping down the sides, which is what I wanted. You see that? The mold that's built up, and I can see it on the inside a little bit too. But that mold was dripping down on the sides, which is good because it wasn't dripping on them. There's no mold in the center of these frames, so that's a good sign. I do have my hives tilted with a little shim. All the wood is all swollen. So now what I need to do is get on the beekeepers page and ask other people, you know, what do I do with, we still have, gosh, it's February, March. Well, I guess we only got like 1 to 2 more months before bees are flying again. What do I do with the frames that have drawn comb possibly some honey. I need to look in these ones. I'm assuming if there's nothing in here, there's nothing in the top box. But how do I keep moths and hive beetles out? I'm assuming I freeze them, but I don't have enough room in my freezer for all these. So this is beekeeping. This is beekeeping. Unfortunate part of beekeeping. So the other thing, whoa, bunch of moisture just came right off of that. That's great. That's real. I don't treat my bees for mites. And a lot of people will be like, they died to mites. And let's be honest, like I would see more mites on my bottom board if that were the case, and I do not. I see very few. I don't even see all those little specks. Well, the mites are the darkest specks, which you probably won't be able to see through the camera lens, but like right here on the eye, that little speck up there at the very tip, see that little red thing? That is a mite. There's another one right there. There's another one, I'm sure somewhere on here on the O. So I mean, looking at my bottom board alone, there's 2 more or 3 more down here. There's really not that many mites on here. For as big as this colony was, there should be more if the mites were an issue. All right, here's the centermost hive, or the centermost frame in this top hive, the top deep box, which when I checked, this is where they were. When I fed them in December, they were all in the center and the top. But you can see, I mean, if this is where the cluster is at, all the butts sticking out, I've read that that can also be an indicator that that's where the center of the cluster was, which makes sense if they're taking up all the room that they can. But it's also a sign of starvation, so I don't know. And considering how all of their reserves are depleted, it would take me a lot to believe that they didn't die of starvation, which as a beekeeper sucks, because I feel like I did my part. I did the absolute best that I could, but what a bummer. I doubt my other hive's alive. I hate to be a negative Nelly, but if this hive's dead, that one's definitely dead. She's so pretty. She's like golden. It's gonna be a hot spot for any bees that have made it through the winter. I'm dying to get into this hive. There's no way. There's no way they're still alive. There's mold all over the top of this top cover. Apparently the insulation wasn't a great choice for moisture. Next year, I'm definitely doing like a burlap quilted box with pine shavings. That's what I wanted to do this year, but we started so late that like we literally didn't have time on top of what we were doing inside our house. More mold. That's not good. Bummer. This is just a disappointing video, y'all. But as tempted as I am to not share it, it needs to be shared, because this is the reality. This is the reality of not just beekeeping, but being a young homesteader, a suburban homesteader, you know, trying to make things work. And this is the reality, is things live and things die. So on this hive, I actually did a sugar board. That's what this is right here. You can literally see the moisture building up right there, all the mold. So this idea was that this loose sugar, which is exactly what I had in here with a few pine shavings, actually these were walnut shavings, but that the loose sugar itself would soak up the moisture, which is a very common thing. So here's what I think happened. We had a spell in January that was very warm, just like today. And then it got really, really cold. I don't know if you guys remember or if you were hit by it, but this is where the South got that big snowstorm. Well, we had super, super Arctic air here in the Midwest, which was very, very cold. So then you have all of this condensation that happens from bees, you know, and then nature itself going from warm to cool just suddenly. And I really feel like the bees just didn't know what to do with all the moisture. Like, am I crazy? Like, there just was so much moisture all of a sudden that these bees, at least in this one, they couldn't handle it. I don't know. This hive also I had low hopes for, so I'm not as disappointed. My big hive, my blue queen girl, not gonna lie, y'all, I could have cried. That was really sad. So I can see already that right there. Here, maybe this will help it focus. Right there, that's capped honey. So I'm curious, that whole frame's actually capped honey from the top at least. I'm curious what happened to this hive. I'm getting propolis all over everything. So this is interesting. This looks like a queen cell right here. The thing that interests me is there is no opening to it, which almost makes me wonder if this colony became queenless before they died. Then we've got honey on the other side, which it's starting to seep out. I'm gonna see if I can save this. Capped honey is done. Done honey. I'm gonna break this open and see if there's a bee in there. Yeah. There sure was. So for whatever reason, this colony, and it's not a swarm. Usually a swarm queen cell will be on the outside of the comb. This is in the middle. And she wasn't even close to being ready. I wonder when they started that. Now I'm curious if I'm even gonna find my green queen that was in here. Well, that was a super interesting find. Well, these girls certainly didn't starve. Looks like fermented honey in there. It's like, looks all bubbly. Another frame with honey. Honey on it, starting to ooze. Probably because I bumped it. Wow, yeah, look at that. Isn't that just beautiful? What a glorious chunk of honey that they made. And here. These girls were working hard before the winter came. Yep. So, I mean, these girls, this was a small colony. It probably had 5,000 to 10,000. There wasn't a lot in here. The other one, seriously, probably had 25,000 to 35,000 in it alone. The good news is I don't see as much mold on this one. And it's the one that had the cozy cover on. I thought there would have been more moisture trapped in this one, but maybe because they had more loose sugar, because this hive wasn't aggressive. They were super docile. When I put the sugar in here, it, like, every time I checked, looked the same. But that colony, half the sugar would be gone every time I checked it. Like, they were like, what is this? We're either eating it or getting rid of it. So I texted my bee guy, the guy I got all of my supplies from, who was in beekeeping for years before they stopped because their family just got to the point where they couldn't do both, and asked for advice. But in the meantime, I think I grabbed my swarm trap, or my little nuke here, and I'm going to put all of the capped honey in here and stick it in the garage until I know what to do with it, just so like mice and other little critters don't come and forage it. There's another bee flying by me. She came out of nowhere. They're hungry. They're flying today. If their hives made it through the winter, they're flying. So that's actually a good sign, because that means that we're close enough to another colony that they are foraging this far out, which means somebody's colonies, or wild colonies, which would be even better, made it through that cold snap and have made it through the bulk of winter, and they're within 3 miles of us. So that gives me hope of catching a swarm. Can't really get the butts out of there. I've yet to find little green queen. There's actually a good chance that this colony, now looking at the frames underneath the bees that were on them, starved as well, because there's a lot with their butts in the comb. And like I said earlier, the cluster might not have been able to move to where the food actually was, which would then, cause starvation, even though, despite having food readily available, it's just that the cluster didn't get there before they died. That's a different girl in there. Oh no, she looks like she's stuck, actually. There you go, girl. Where are you at? She made it out. Well, I need to finish putting these together and move everything back into the garage. You look a little dirty there, darlings. How about that? I am, however, very glad that I found my blue queen because she was my first queen ever in it. Am I going to save her and probably scrapbook her? Is that weird? Maybe, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to sign off here and hopefully catch you guys on some more positive videos in the future. See you later.